So we're starting at a place that was supposed to be for quiet mourning, a makeshift memorial for the victims of the Bondi massacre. But as you'll see, it very quickly turned into something else entirely, a really raw public scene of conflict.
Imagine the somber atmosphere, people grieving, and then this shout just cuts right through it all. "Get out of here!" And these words, they weren't just random anger. They were aimed squarely at one person. And, in an instant, a vigil became a tense standoff. The person at the center of all this was a single woman. Her arrival, for whatever reason, completely transformed this gathering for the victims into a flashpoint of confrontation. So let's get into why her presence was so explosive.
Okay, let's really break down what happened right there at the memorial, where all this grief and anger just collided in such a public, dramatic way. Well, things escalated, and they escalated fast. So fast, in fact, that about 20 police officers had to step in. I mean, they literally formed a human barrier around the woman just to separate her from the crowd before walking her several blocks away. That is a massive police response for what was meant to be a peaceful vigil.
To really understand the intensity of that moment, you have to understand the incredible grief that was hanging in the air. We need to remember who this community was there to mourn. You know, this wasn't some abstract tragedy. For them, it was deeply, deeply personal. And here are their names. Each one represents a life that was just cut short, a family completely shattered. This is who the community gathered to honor, and it's that collective sorrow that really defined the day. And these are the stories behind those names. We're talking about a beloved local photographer who was also a former detective, a man who died protecting his wife, a Holocaust survivor, and a rabbi with 5 kids, including a newborn son just 6 weeks old. I mean, these are the reasons the community's grief was so real, so palpable.
And the tragedy just keeps going. Beyond those who lost their lives, about 40 other people were injured, and many of them were still in critical condition. So that just added this whole other layer of anxiety and pain to the community's mourning.
So now, let's circle back to that confrontation. With all of that heartbreaking context in mind, we can maybe start to understand the different perspectives. Why did this one person's presence provoke such a powerful, visceral reaction?
Right in the middle of all the chaos, a reporter managed to ask her that one central question. Why were you here? And her answer, well, it gives us her side of the story. She said she was there because she's Jewish and felt a personal connection, explaining that her family was murdered in the Holocaust. But here's the part that really stands out. She claimed the tragedy had been politicized, and that's what she came to protest. But from the crowd's point of view, it felt deliberately provocative. The reporter who was there on the scene said that mourners felt she was antagonizing them. They weren't just questioning her being there, but the timing of it, the whole manner of her arrival.
This clash of views, it didn't just happen in a vacuum. Her claim about the event being politicized actually points to this broader political dimension to the whole thing, because this memorial drew figures from all across the political spectrum.
You had members of the Greens Party, but you also had the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, and the opposition leader, Susan Ley. That just shows you how significant this event was, not just for the local community, but really on a national level.
And that political tension, it wasn't just under the surface. It came right out into the open when a reporter directly challenged Green Senator David Shoebridge, asking if he took any responsibility for the environment that's been created. It was a pretty clear reference to what some in the community feel about the party's handling of anti-Semitism.
Senator Shoebridge, well, he didn't really accept the premise of the question. He reframed protests as an act of common humanity. He insisted his reason for being there was simple: to show solidarity with the grieving community.
So all of this leaves us with a really tough question, right? What happened at the Bondi memorial shows? This painful collision of private sorrow, public expression, and political tension. And it makes you wonder, when a tragedy like this unfolds on a public stage, who really gets to decide how a community grieves?